Welcome into another edition of Rival Insiders here on KSLSports.com. I'm your BYU insider, Mitch Harper, joined as always by Utah Utes insider, Michelle Bodkin. Every Tuesday here at high noon, you get to spend your lunch break with us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and of course on KSLSports.com. The college football season is in double digits. Week 10 is in the rearview mirror. Now we look ahead to week 11. And Michelle, it's an interesting spot here for both BYU and Utah. The Utes, they get a win over Arizona. They improved to 7-2 on the season, but feels like there's it wasn't like a celebratory win. It was just kind of a business as usual sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to get too high until they potentially get the job done against Oregon. Is kind of how I feel. They understand that's the job, and they have to take care of these couple of easier games in the lead up to, but the real job is Oregon. And so I think the mindset is, there's nothing really to celebrate unless we take care of business at Oregon and stamp our ticket to the Pac-12 championship game.
Does the level of play, though, feel like they're trending in a direction where they're going to be able to take down Oregon? I guess that's kind of where I wonder, because it didn't look like Cam Rising was anywhere near to 100%. And then you got the injuries at the running back position, injuries at tight end. It's a banged-up team. It still took care of business with ease. But is there concern on that front?
I mean, I'm a little bit concerned. It's really just going to be interesting and a matter of, how do these guys heal up? Do they heal up in time? Do they have the right amount of guys back? The unfortunate thing is, the offense is kind of dealing with some of these injuries while the defense appears to kind of finally be clicking and finding their stride. So it's almost like two ships passing in the night. And not that the offenses look bad. They've been really good at, I think, creatively continuing to find ways to be explosive and win. But I mean, it is kind of getting to the point where, they're maybe running out of bodies and options to do that with. And so they're going to need guys to start coming back before that Oregon game. Hopefully Kincaid's good to go. Hopefully by then Cam Rising's, in a better place. So that they can get things done. And I mean, the good news is it sounds like, whatever happened with Jaquindon Jackson, who was doing really, really well in that game before he was out, I think for half of the third quarter, I think was about when he went out. So it sounds like, he's probably going to be available. Jalen Glover will eventually be available. Exactly when, I don't know. And then, of course, Tavion looked pretty good in the couple of carries that he got. So, again, there's maybe some hope that people will start coming back and be looking okay come time to play Oregon, but it's very wait and see at the moment.
We got a glimpse at heralded quarterback prospect Nate Johnson. He was a composite top 247 recruit in the 2022 class. 6'2", 183. What's maybe not necessarily this year, but maybe the long-term prospects of him? Is he viewed as kind of the next star in the building after Cam Rising at that quarterback spot? What does the quarterback pipeline look like, or is he the guy?
I mean, Utah isn't going to tip their hand, and they're certainly not going to give it to him. But I think the talk amongst fans and even media types and quietly in the building kind of has leaned towards, I think it's Nate Johnson's job to lose. And that's not a knock against Bryson. Obviously, Bryson's going to be given an opportunity, and he deserves an opportunity because he's done very well with the instances that he's been given, to kind of take over the offense and do what needs to get done. But I just think Bryson has limits, whereas I think Nate Johnson, like, we've just seen the tip of the iceberg with this kid, to be perfectly honest. It sounds like He's very good at throwing the ball, very good at making decisions. None of us have seen that because they don't open practices, and that's the only place that has been seen. But like, there's just been a lot of talk about that amongst people. And so that kind of leads me to believe that Nate Johnson probably is the future for Utah, but at the same time, anything can happen. So
elite speed with Nate Johnson. I remember seeing in the summertime some of his track and field videos on social media, and you saw that speed on Saturday against Arizona. It's kind of a side note with quarterbacks and Utah's pipeline, maybe BYU's pipeline as we transition to the Cougars. Isaac Wilson gets an offer from Utah. I think that caused a little bit of headlines because it was well documented that Zach Wilson was never given a scholarship offer to Utah because they had a Jack Tuttle back then. Any chance you think Utah can get in the mix with Isaac Wilson? He's priority number one for BYU. What about for the Utes?
Early on, and this is 2 years out, essentially, but early on, indication is there really is genuine mutual interest from both parties. We'll see, how that plays out and if that continues to stick. I mean, the kid has some really good offers, right now. I think I saw Oregon on there. I believe Georgia or Clemson, one of those two. I forget exactly who's on that list, but I mean, he's starting to rack up a really good offer list. And so it's going to be interesting to see, what plays out. Is it kind of the childhood team that he always rooted for? Is it, the team that his brother went to and had success? Is it, someplace completely different that he falls in love with? But again, kind of early indication, it feels like there really truly is genuine mutual interest from both parties.
Going to be a big time recruit. I've said since I watched him when he was a freshman, and I felt he's better than Zach Wilson at this age, and I think he is still to this point in his career at Corner Canyon as a junior. I think Isaac Wilson's going to be an outstanding quarterback, whatever school he goes to. Zach has said that he's trying to tell his brother, hey, not get worried about the glamorous programs and get caught up in that. He wants him to maybe look at who's going to give you the opportunity to play right away. And when you kind of forecast long term, I was kind of looking at some future depth charts that I've kind of pieced together, and I look at BYU's situation. I think 2024 he could be a guy that steps in right away and is the dude from day one, which I think could be a compelling case. And there's obviously that chemistry there with Aaron Roderick and the history that between those two. And Kalani Sitake loves the Wilson family. It dates back to their time at Utah. But, with Utah as well, I'm kind of curious to see, if Nate Johnson has a rise in the program, does that maybe taper off the potential to get an Isaac Wilson? We'll see. Quarterback stuff is always interesting. Typically with these QBs, though, they make decisions with their schools about the summer before the signing day. So we're talking maybe, 9 months till maybe potentially some decisions. Quarterbacks typically commit very early to teams, not giving a timeline there for Isaac Wilson. He's going to determine his situation, but typically quarterback prospects go off the board very early. So it's very noteworthy to see Utah getting in the mix, and BYU, Miami, Oklahoma, Georgia. He's got the who's who going after him. So it's going to be quite the battle to see who ends up getting Corner Canyon quarterback Isaac Wilson. BYU would love to get him, and BYU is celebrating right now is they got a huge win by their standards for a slump-busting win. I don't think Boise State is anything spectacular this year, but they get a win, 31-28 over the Broncos, and it busts a 4-game skid that the Cougars were on, and they did it in an impressive fashion with Puka Nacua dazzling with some of his big pass catches in this game and put together one of the best catches we've seen in BYU football history. So now BYU 5-5, they're going to go to a bowl game. They'll beat Utah Tech, and then the season comes down to a road trip to Stanford on the farm on Thanksgiving weekend. What do you think of that BYU win over Boise on the Blue?
It was desperately needed. I mean, that really was kind of a do or die game for that team. If they didn't get that one, as we've kind of talked about before, the chances of them getting a bowl game were kind of slim. It really put the pressure on getting a win over not Boise, over Stanford after their bye week. So, it takes that pressure off a little bit. I think they can kind of sit back and relax. Not too much, but not have that like pressure on them that, we're flirting with really, really, really underachieving. And I have to say, during the Saturday show, we replayed the interview or media availability that BYU had with Jaren Hall. And I wasn't sure what to expect from that game, but listening back to that, I felt a little bit more confident in what BYU potentially could do, because he just was not talking like a guy that was defeated. And that was kind of the narrative, I feel like, surrounding the team leading up to that game was, well, are they feeling defeated? What's the mindset of the team? I thought Jaren handled that situation really, really well, and spoke like a true leader. And it appears, obviously, I wasn't able to actually watch that game because I was currently at the Utah game at the same time. But by all accounts, it just sounds like these guys really kind of rallied around each other and got the job done.
They did, and Jaren Hall almost had 400 yards against the nation's number one pass defense coming into that game. Boise State, they're an interesting program, how they want to go to a Big 12 or a Power 5 league, but I just feel like their best days are behind them. And, there was talk coming in of, Liberty didn't beat anyone, but they beat BYU. And, Liberty, though, had a close call against Wake Forest. East Carolina had a close call against NC State, whereas Boise, their only game against a P5 was Oregon State, and they got smoked in week 1. Taylor Green's a good quarterback for them, but I just kind of wonder about Boise State long term. I don't think it's a program that's ever going to maybe find themselves in that Power 5, middle class 3 threshold that they aspired to be in. It's an interesting situation. BYU and Boise got a long history that brings an end to their annual rivalry as BYU moves to the Big 12 conference. I will say, if you look at the hierarchy of rivalry games for BYU in non-conference, you'd probably definitely put Utah number 1. And then number 2, to me, I would put Boise State above Utah State, because I don't think the Aggies are a game that, quite frankly, that BYU really needs to make much effort with, because I think that's one where you just move on from. Boise State, though, that's one, if you do want to kick the tires again, it's a pretty good game. A little bit of hostility, though, in the crowd. I've heard some talk about some poor interactions BYU and Boise fans had on both sides. But, BYU, whenever they roll into a town, it brings out some emotions from people, that's for sure. And BYU, again, moves to 5-5 on the year. And they're going to definitely probably go to a bowl game. I mean, they're going to take Utah Tech, and then it'll come down to Stanford. And I will say, too, Puka Nacua, spectacular performance. I said after the game, and I still stick to it, he's right there with Austin Collie as one of the best receivers in BYU football history. What would you say?
When he's healthy, he is so fun to watch. And that's kind of been his biggest knock. And that was kind of Samson Nacua's biggest knock too. When he was healthy, he was brilliant, and he was so fun to watch. I don't know what it is about those two. They've had some issues with that, but man, when they can put together a complete game, so fun to watch.
I loved Puka's commentary after the game. When I asked him about maybe the mood in the locker room, it's got to be a lot more enjoyable, these experiences, rather than all the losing. He's like, yeah, love and learn's a lot better when you're winning, because love and learn has been a point of contention at times for BYU fans. They're like, Kalani, if you say love and learn one more time, I'm going to flip. And, love and learn's a little bit more enjoyable. It slaps a little different when you get a win, and BYU again gets the win 31-28. They will now have their next FBS opponent being the Stanford Cardinal, who the Utes face this week as we transition into Utah versus Stanford. Kickoff at 8 o'clock on ESPN. You'll be there up at Rice Eccles. Kind of interesting. Utah hasn't hosted Stanford in 5 years, in Salt Lake. And oddly enough, the Cardinal have a winning record in Salt Lake. The lone win against Stanford in Salt Lake was that one in 2013 that ended up being a 5-7 year. But Stanford was number 5 in the nation. I think it was, refresh my memory, who was the quarterback at Stanford? It was
it wasn't Luck.
Hogan.
It was Hogan.
Yeah,
yeah.
It was Hogan, and that was
Andrew Luck.
Yeah, as a man who once produced the Voice of the Utes radio show, Bill Riley, I remember that intro all the time, hearing that call. Utah taking down number 5 Stanford. But kind of interesting side note there. What's your early read on this match between the Utes and the Cardinal?
I think Utah should probably take care of Stanford pretty easily, even with their injuries. Stanford is a very, very interesting case. I actually have, some friends and relationships that are very close to Stanford, and kind of, hear things and see things a little bit more. And I hear interesting things about that program all the time. David Shaw, if I'm being honest, gets a lot of credit for being an incredible leader and coach. And I've been told multiple times that it's a little bit of a farce, and he gets a lot more credit than he deserves. I think people are starting to finally kind of understand that. Stanford just has not been getting the type of results that I think, at least in the modern era, we expect Stanford to have. And it's going to be interesting to see, what they do moving forward. But it just feels like the team has kind of quit on David Shaw. They have their moments. Obviously, they beat Notre Dame, so they have the potential, but they just don't always realize it. And that's kind of, I think, been the biggest storyline of the David Shaw era. There's always potential there with that team. They've vastly, I think, underachieved on it, though.
I feel like they're slipping to what they were before Jim Harbaugh, the Buddy Tevens era, where it was just Stanford's the walking win. I mean, you think about from Harbaugh to the early years of David Shaw. Like I said, 2013, they were the number 5 team in the country. They were always in the New Year's 6 BCS Bowl conversation, and they have fallen hard. I mean, that game last year in Palo Alto on the farm, Utah annihilated them, and Utah didn't even really break a sweat to annihilate them. It was just basically 2 or 3 plays. They didn't have to dip into the playbook, and Utah just wrecked them. And I'm thinking, man, Stanford, I was stunned that they brought back David Shaw this season. He's tried to reinvent the offense a little bit, but it's not working. And they got a star quarterback in Tanner McKee, who NFL scouts love, and he's the prototypical type that you want in the classic NFL QB at 6'5", 6'6". But Stanford is not good. Utah should roll in this one. I know Van Fillinger, as you reported, he's out for the year, which is a big loss. But I'm curious too, who will be some guys that will replace Fillinger off the edge in that D-line spot with him now out?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is Utah has been rotating through, I believe Witt said 5 guys. So now it's going to be down to 4 guys. So in a way, it is a big loss, but it's not a big loss because they've been kind of utilizing everybody. But I feel like, someone like Jonah Ellis has really, really been figuring it out. He's had flashes here and there, but it feels like the last little bit, he's been very key in what the defense has been doing to get pressure on the quarterback. I think Connor O'Toole is starting to kind of settle in a little bit. And then there's Mickey Sugataraga as well. And he's had his moments where he's looked really good. So it's going to be, a total team effort, which isn't anything exactly new. Obviously, you want all your bodies available, but they're just going to have to roll with one less.
Honestly, the timing, because I feel like, Utah's favored by 24 here. This is kind of I don't want to say tune-up game, because any Pac-12 game we see in college football, anything can happen in any given week. And with the amount of injuries Utah's navigating, you never want to take anything for granted. I get that. But if Utah does what they're supposed to, they should handle business. and it's a nice chance to kind of give this new rotation, it's kind of a little bit of wind under their sails as they get ready for that game next week against Oregon, which is really going to decide the season. The thing is, too, is that despite maybe some of the kind of nondescript play of sorts the past few weeks, they got a chance to go to the Pac-12 title still and play for a Rose Bowl, and that's all you can ask for. So you got to take care of business here against the Cardinal.
Yep. It's been one game at a time. Like I said, I think the reason for perhaps not being totally whoop over some of these last wins is because it's just one step closer to really getting the job done, and the job is Oregon. So until Oregon's handled, there's not going to be a ton of outward celebrating.
Utes win big then, you think?
I kind of suspect this will probably be a big win for them. I think Arizona has a better offense, and if Utah could handle Arizona the way that they did, I don't see, unless they again decide to take a nap, and or Stanford just comes in very, very fired up. I just don't see Utah throwing this one.
Yeah, neither do I. I see Utah winning big against the Cardinal, which then leads us into the rest of our Week 11 picks in college football. I gained another game on you, Michelle. I'm 43-19. You are 40-22. So 3 games back. Got to make up some steam here. But there's some opportunities. There's some games that could maybe swing things in your favor. Maybe we'll see how they play out. Let's go dive into these games. Number 17, North Carolina at number 21, Wake Forest. I'll go with Wake Forest here to pull the upset. I'm not sold on North Carolina at all. They're 8-1 right now. Their only losses to Notre Dame. They keep winning. They could be a college football playoff team.
Yeah.
We'll see the rankings come out tonight. But I'm going to go Wake Forest. What about you?
Okay. Well, again, to try and make up some ground, I will go North Carolina. I don't know that I have a huge opinion one way or another, but we will go with North Carolina just to try and close the gap.
How about this one? Washington at number 8, Oregon. Week before the Utah game in Autzen, Ducks are going to be at home against Washington. It's a big rivalry game for both teams. Oregon's kind of dominated this series. What do you see happening in this one?
I kind of think Oregon takes care of business, but this is another one of those games where, like we talked about last week with Cal and USC, and it ended up being the case, that it could get a little interesting. But I do think ultimately Oregon walks away with the win.
I'm going to go with Oregon too. It was kind of crazy to see some of the speculation that's out there in the interwebs about Dan Lanning possibly being linked to Auburn. Man, I'll tell you, if that happened, that would be wild. Because
Oregon,
if the coaching carousel has hit Oregon hard, I would think that that Dan Lanning would stay at Oregon, but at the same time, Auburn is an amazing program with incredible resources, and it's near Atlanta. It would be hard to turn down Auburn. But when I saw that, I was like, whoa, because I just think Daddy Program, as they call him up in the Pacific Northwest, I think he's a good fit there. He's done a really nice job, but he's got a ton of Southeast ties, maybe something to monitor there. But I do think the Ducks get it done against the Huskies. This is an interesting game. LSU at Arkansas. LSU riding high after that win over the Crimson Tide. Any potential letdown here?
I'm not totally sold on LSU, but I also don't think Arkansas is going to take them down. I think somebody's going to get them before the season's over, but I don't think that it's Arkansas.
I'm going to go with Arkansas in this one. It's in Fayetteville. The battle for the boot. It's Arkansas and LSU. LSU riding high. Arkansas is ticked off after losing at home to Liberty. Liberty was up 21-zip, and then Arkansas made a run at it, scored 19 unanswered, but couldn't get over the top. I'm going to go Arkansas with the upset. I think LSU, they control their destiny in the SEC West, and I've given rave reviews about Brian Kelly, the job he's doing. He's a heck of a coach, but I think LSU is always prone to a slip up, and I think it happens here against the Razorbacks. Number 6, Alabama at number 11, Ole Miss. It doesn't ease up for the Crimson Tide, who have struggled in a lot of spots this year. Do they go down again and get their 3rd loss in the regular season?
Oh man, that would be so delicious. Not gonna lie. Ole Miss is interesting. I mean, the history between Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban is fascinating. This is another game. I think Ole Miss maybe makes it interesting. I don't think Alabama's losing 2 in a row.
Yeah, I'll go with the Crimson Tide too. We're talking about Dan Lanning and Auburn. Is Lane Kiffin, are his eyes wandering a little bit towards the plains within the SEC West? Because Auburn's going to throw the money at him. I mean, in Ole Miss, I think Lane Kiffin has done all that he can at Ole Miss. I think that's the guy that should go and take Auburn. Auburn kind of needs a character almost in a way at that program, and I think Lane Kiffin would be dynamite at Auburn. He would be outstanding as a recruiter there, and maybe Ole Miss a little bit distracted. We've seen how coaches sometimes that can affect the performance of teams when the headlines get out there and the speculation starts building. I'll go with the Crimson Tide and Bryce Young. I think it's easy to forget how great he is. He's still been pretty spectacular at times this season, even though Bama has not had the wide receivers and some of the success that we've grown to expect from the Crimson Tide. An interesting group of 5 matchup with New Year's 6 implications. Number 25, UCF at number 19, Tulane. I really like this Tulane team a lot. Willie Fritz has done a heck of a job building that program up. They kind of get in 1998 Sean King Tulane vibes in the Big Easy, but I will go with UCF. They have picked up a lot of steam as of late. They started out slow this year, but Gus Malzahn and the Knights are explosive once again. Give me UCF. What about you?
Again, just to mix it up a little bit, I will go with Tulane. Hang the banner.
Yeah, this will be interesting. I mean, imagine a scenario where we see Tulane in a Cotton Bowl against an SEC team, potentially. Kind of be wild to possibly see that. And then the final game on the docket this week, I believe where College Game Day is going to be, number 7 TCU at number 24 Texas. We could be talking about TCU tonight in the top 4 of the playoff rankings. I think they deserve to be there. They should be there. If they had the Texas brand, they would be in there. I think Joel Klatt from Fox said that, and I completely agree. They're getting brand bias against them. That's why the committee is a joke, and they need to be thrown out completely. Who do you got in this one, TCU and Texas?
Let's go TCU. I've always liked TCU. I really appreciate how Gary Patterson coached them back in the old Mountain West days. I get it's, a new regime under Sonny Dykes, but I don't know. There's something about the Horned Frogs I've always kind of liked. So,
well, speaking of Gary Patterson, he's an analyst at Texas right now, so I'm sure he's instilling any sort of intel that he can for Steve Sarkisian. This game's going to be personal, probably for Gary Patterson, because it's kind of crazy to think TCU forced out their winningest coach and Gary Patterson, the guy that got him to a Rose Bowl. They forced him out. It's worked out nicely because Sonny Dykes is, I think, taking it to another level. His offensive system is going to be really good in the new Big 12. I'm going to go TCU as well here. Texas is not good in close games, but they're a good football team this year. I think Sarkisian's building it up. Like, it's not Texas is a fluke. They're a joke. They're not going to lose to Kansas or anyone like that this year. Texas is a good football team, but I think TCU is really good. And I think TCU in a college football landscape that has a clear number 1 and I think a clear number 2 in Ohio State, number 1 being Georgia, I think TCU warrants being that number 4 team. I think that they're a really good football team, and they've played a schedule that's been pretty tough. I think they've had some benefits with the quarterbacks of these teams being in and out, but still, they've taken care of business, and they've taken some of the best efforts from their opposing teams and still won these games. So I'm going to go with the Horned Frogs to take down the Longhorns. That's going to do it for us, though. Rival Insiders. You can follow us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Instagram Reels. We need to throw out more TikToks on the KSL Sports TikTok feed, but still follow us there. And we'll be back next Tuesday here on Rival Insiders at high noon, breaking down all the latest in the world of BYU and Utah and college football here on KSL Sports.